Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with ATS Automation, where we'll be looking at what it takes to scale the mass production of batteries from laboratory to Gigafactory. I'm Andy Colthorpe, editor of Energy Storage News and deputy editor-in-chief at Solar Media. Energy in today's world is becoming increasingly defined by electrification, and electrification of the grid, buildings, and transport will rely more and more on batteries, and crucially, access to well-designed batteries that can be made to top-notch quality time and again. Ever since Elon Musk coined the word Gigafactory all the way back in 2013, the scale of mass production of batteries required to meet global electrification challenges and enabling the massive uptake of renewable energy has been apparent. And frankly, media and investors alike can't get enough of this concept. In our recent webinar with Clean Energy Associates, we looked at some of the risks and pitfalls associated with battery energy storage system production. In today's session, we'll go back to the drawing board and learn more about how a battery gigafactory dream can become reality. Both the opportunities and challenges ahead create fascinating food for thought. With the vast majority of the batteries set to power our world in the coming years yet to be made, and even the production lines that will make those batteries yet to be made, this matters more than ever. One exciting recent battery storage supply chain dynamic is the rise of production lines dedicated to stationary energy storage cells, modules, and packs. Not so long ago, gigafactories were being announced by the dozens of gigawatt hours, almost exclusively with serving the electric vehicle sector in mind. Now, we can hardly be jealous that electric vehicles command a much bigger share of the market overall. After all, it isn't likely we'll all be needing 50 kilowatt hours plus batteries in our homes the way we might in our cars anytime soon. And grid-scale energy storage is effective precisely because it can be deployed strategically in the places where it offers the most value. But as we heard in a recent interview with Kevin Shang, energy storage supply chain analyst with Wood Mackenzie, where once manufacturers might separate off a few production lines away from serving EV customers to focus on the battery energy storage system market, dedicated stationary storage production sites represent a growing trend. In today's webinar, ATS automation expert Robert Fallhammer will talk about what that process looks like and how you can get your ideas off the ground and into the gigawatt hour scale successfully. Now, as always, interaction with you, the audience, is really important to us. Robert's presentation will include 2 quick polls for you to take part in, and the session will, as always, conclude with an audience Q&A section. You can put your questions in the tab you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll try and answer as many of your questions as possible in the short time we have allotted, but ATS Automation representatives will be happy to reach out to you and reply to any that we don't have time to cover in this session. And lastly from me, today's webinar will be recorded and made available to registrants on demand at Energy Storage News. So with that out of the way, and without further ado, it's my great pleasure to hand you over to our guest speaker today, Robert Fallhammer. Over to you, Robert.
Thank you very much, Andy. Appreciate the introduction to our webinar here today. If we start our webinar and we start our journey, a couple of words to myself. I am the Vice President of Sales at ATS Industrial Automation. I'm based in Cambridge in Ontario in Canada, and I have been involved in the automation space for about the last 35 years or so. Battery automation has been a part of my life for the last half dozen or so years. I believe that together with the ATS team that we bring significant experience to the automation discussion. As active as the battery industry is these days, I think that we can make a difference to companies looking to scale to Gigafactory. If we look at what we're going to cover in today's webinar, significant amount of content that we're going to go through. We'd like to discuss the journey of a battery company from idea to a Gigafactory scale manufacturer. Along the way, we'll address equipment and service possibilities to support the battery company's primary technical, financial, and organizational needs. We'll introduce a 7 stages model and hopefully use that to frame our discussion. The elements discussed and the associated ATS offerings have been shown to reduce risk, more quickly optimize product design, and provide critical support to often stretched teams. We'll talk about when to engage with consulting and automation solution partners. We'll talk about the importance of battery testing. It's not just about assembly, it's how do you make sure you're producing a good product. We'll talk about why design for manufacturability is a critical milestone around the journey of a battery design to make sure that cost per kilowatt hour goals can be achieved. And we'll talk about transitioning from manual processing to more highly automated processes and some of the steps and the pitfalls in that journey. We'll also talk a little bit about how to leverage data and digitalization to scale your manufacturing. So who we are. ATS is a 46-year-old, $2.2 billion publicly traded industrial automation company. We have many different verticals. The space that I am in is ATS Industrial Automation, where we focus on mobility, nuclear, and energy and consumer applications. In the last half dozen years or so, the focus on battery has really driven a lot of our business and an area where we've established significant expertise. We are a publicly traded company, and more information on ATS, if you're interested, can be read on the web at www.atsautomation.com, or please feel free to reach out to myself or to any of our front-end team who would be happy to engage in the discussion with you. We're now going to switch to battery energy storage systems and the importance of battery energy storage on a zero carbon future. So as a part of our CO2 emissions reduction goals, battery innovation is happening in many different areas, in mobility, as well as in stationary grid storage and in fuel cell applications. Governments are putting funding mechanisms in place to fuel battery development and commercialization. Battery development itself is drawing significant investment, and managing the risk of deploying that capital is a critical capability. From a recent report, 90% of patent activity in the new energy space is involved in battery technologies. And critically, to get these innovations to market, all manufacturers need to put in place product development and manufacturing roadmaps to assure success. So battery manufacturing is not that easy. I'm sure that most on the call realize that battery manufacturing is not that easy. The challenges of scaling up manufacturing are significant, no matter what the product is. Very few manufacturing scale-ups do we see the volume of product design changes throughout the equipment build cycle like we see in the battery space. Properly deployed automation has benefits improving product quality and controlling cost. In the recent study by Clean Energy Associates, which Andy had noted, it highlighted an interesting statistic that 44% of inspected energy storage units had thermal management system quality issues, while 50% of all defects were weld defects. To truly understand the size of the issue, we really need to dig into the details of the report, but I believe that it points out that there's a need in the industry to focus on manufacturing approaches to maximize quality. Enlisting an automation partner like ATS, who understands the processes, tooling, and software, can definitely help to improve this. We'll now look at ATS in battery assembly and where we come from. So ATS has been involved in battery assembly for many, many years. We have delivered approximately 110 battery lines spread across mobility and stationary applications. This includes several projects in cell automation, numerous projects in module assembly, and we've also completed a number of pack assembly lines. There's a great variety in the range of products that we've assembled, including cell-only, cell-to-module configurations, as well as cell-to-pack configurations, and anything in between. In addition, our thoughts and approaches are informed through numerous other discussions with industry players and engineering and management staff at customers in the industry. With these experiences combined with 46 years of assembly automation history, we've learned that the battery manufacturing strategy must balance production volume, reasonable automation levels, and all of that with capital cost, process quality, and the likelihood that the battery design will change. Managing these trade-offs via manufacturing scale-up strategy is where ATS can help. We now look at the journey from energy storage to Gigafactory. In the next slides, we'll present a manufacturing evolution framework, which is helpful to understand how the needs of various stakeholders can be addressed when developing a multi-year path to a Gigafactory. There's a lot of detail to be covered here, and we'll be going through all of it. The model that was created as we looked at the journey of many of our customers is a 7-stage journey in our mind. This can be sliced and diced in many different ways, but we believe that it provides a framework to understanding the challenges that the individual battery manufacturers are going through on a day-to-day basis. It starts at initial ideation and transitions all the way through to increasing production volumes, more stable battery design, all the way through to scaling and the maturity phase where the Gigafactory manufacturer is in production. If we look at, Andy had mentioned that we were going to do a couple of survey questions throughout the webinar. And as I'm going through my next remark, I'll pass it to Andy to take us through our first survey question, and maybe some of this will then inform the rest of my remarks in the presentation.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Robert. So yes, everybody, you can respond to the poll. You will see that the options have popped up on your screen there. And so, yes, what are your company's current needs? So, is it to design, test, and validate battery functionality and manufacturability? Or are you needing to provide low-volume product samples to customers with small-scale equipment? Or perhaps you're a little bit further along in that journey, and what you need is to acquire high-volume automated equipment to drive volume and scale. There's a little bit of a duplicate there, so feel free to respond to either one that you choose. So automated equipment drives scale and volume. Or finally, perhaps you're not in any of those categories. You're not a manufacturer, but in fact, your contract manufacturer is ramping up volume production, and you need to know more about that. So you can submit your vote through the pop-up that should have come up on your screen there. Alternatively, throughout, you will see that the polls are available on the right-hand side of your screen next to questions. So please do go and respond to that. We'll come back to those, the audience's responses to those in a couple of minutes' time, a couple of slides' time. But I think this might also be fun to have another look when we get to the audience Q&A. So yeah, Robert, back over to you. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andy. So if we look at the 7 stages model, and to gain some understanding of the middle 4 stages of the model and where we came up with the range of situations that battery manufacturers were going through, we really look at the 4 middle stages being those critical stages which are forming the basis for manufacturing. There are common trends which emerge. There was no one-size-fits-all amongst all of our interactions. Cost per kilowatt hour seems to be the universal driver, and investors are a very key part of supporting the journey. Aspiring manufacturing companies have a multi-year development path, which must balance 5 key factors. First one, product design evolution. Battery designs are rarely stable. capital availability, government regulations, market and customers, as well as manufacturing capability and capacity. As we look at the graphic above, then there's clear directions in manufacturing and product maturity. So the four middle stages in the curve are sample manufacturing, low manufacturing, growth, and scaling. For the battery design functionality and stability, initially we have interesting and good battery ideas. The iteration works, but it's still in flux. Then battery design gets more mature, more manufacturable, through to when we're in the scaling mode, that a much more stable battery design is what we're dealing with. The focus of manufacturing becomes a unique cell or the unique special sauce in the battery at the beginning. And then as we advance through scaling, then there's more focus on the manufacturing strategy around cell, module, and pack, or whatever the final configuration is that the end user will want to have as a final product. The automation process maturity, non-existent at the beginning. And as we go through to scaling and Gigafactory, then it becomes very mature. And the automation level, which we see is first of all very manual. It then proceeds through increasing levels of complexity and of automation added to the story, through to high throughput full automation once we get to Gigafactories. So through this evolution, the need for capital increases at an exponential rate. The efforts to secure that capital change as initial investors are augmented by later series investors and institutions. All of those have different risk profiles and objectives. Our efforts to support customers and risk management discussions become a key part of the manufacturing strategy evolution. Well, now, do we have any results from the poll questions, Andy, that we can talk to?
We most certainly do. And I think most exciting of all is that the majority of attendees have actually responded to the poll. So pretty good sample size as it goes. Now, to run you through these answers very briefly. So by far the biggest wedge, 57% of respondents are not manufacturers, but their contract manufacturers are ramping up volume production. Okay. And as I say, 57% of the audience that responded voted in that direction. That said, a pretty significant wedge, about a quarter of you, said that designing, testing, and validating battery functionality and manufacturability is the current need of their company. And then third and fourth, acquiring high volume automated equipment to drive volume and scale. So that's not an insignificant number of you. 12% said that they needed to acquire high volume automated equipment. And finally, 6% of respondents said that providing low volume product samples to customers with small scale equipment is their greatest current need. So broadly in line with what you might have expected there, Robert?
Yeah, pretty good mix of people who are along their journey. And it's great to see that varied variety of interest on the webinar today. And I think that we have some things to talk about that will appeal to most of you as we go through the next slides. And so, yeah, thank you for taking part in that poll. I think it adds to the value of the discussion here.
Excellent.
So, as we continue on here, the first stage in our journey is ideation. And we term it ideation as we have an entity where there are developments, there are ideas, there are sciences that come out of various universities or out of the work of individuals, and happens to be directed at the battery space. Manufacturing strategy at this point is not a focus of the efforts. The company and the entity has first started up, and don't believe that there's a huge focus on how you're going to manufacture it, but rather does the core product have potential. If we then jump to the next phase, we call proof of concept stage. So At the proof of concept phase, the battery company's initial focus is still on the product and developing a product which achieves its performance objectives. The team is very small and it does not have a breadth of capability. It has a very specific capability and is experts in manufacture or in designing and the battery and its capabilities, but manufacturing depth just isn't there. Lacking in industrial engineering and supply chain depth at this phase. The main challenges are balancing the need to design and validate the product, as some of you had indicated on the poll questions, while raising capital and thinking about how to make samples for validation and for early customers. These are push-pull scenarios where they're pulling the early stage company in many different directions. When we get involved at this stage, we bring design for manufacturability advice to the customer, as well as initial test and validation planning. We may provide lean automation or hand tools at this phase as well. So it's very much dependent upon the state where the company is in and where some of the gaps are and what can we do to help in that scenario. We may also provide significant input into planning for investor presentations. Money raised at this point in time may end up needing to carry the company through low volume production. Even in the initial phases of product innovation, direct feedback regarding battery performance under a variety of conditions is key. The ATS test divisions can provide discussion or advice and cycle time appropriate test solutions for electrical, leak, and other battery testing, which can be scaled over time. So that's the proof of concept phase. If we then move into the sample production phase, then we end up with an evolving set of challenges. At this phase, the battery company has made some samples. It understands many of the assembly process steps, but needs to prove to investors and customers that the battery can be made reliably. Through this phase, the battery design is still evolving. It may still have technical challenges and almost universally will be in need of cost reduction. The customer specifies and procures a low volume process intent pilot line whose output may be 1/10 of the eventual low volume line. Product design iteration continues while mainly manual tools are used to move the product from step to step and to complete battery assembly. For processes which need automation for reliability, the company may need to buy in advance a process station for later stages. Examples of this are laser welding or wire bonding or heavy lift ergonomic assists, just because of the nature of the battery product. At this point in time, key challenges that we have are, first of all, battery performance, battery process stability, cost, and the need to continue to reduce cost. Time, limited team bandwidth, managing that time frame and managing expectations of management and investors becomes a critical challenge. And building the internal team. And from startups with very few employees and team members through to full growth Gigafactory manufacturers, there's a long road in building that internal team. So this is a great stage of your evolution to engage with ATS. Key offerings at this phase might include design for assembly assistance, manufacturing equipment spec generation, product testing advice and test hardware, as well as upgradable automation for process material handling and for testing. If we then get through the sample production phase into low volume manufacturing, at low volume manufacturing is where we have another evolving set of challenges. At this phase, the target battery concept is proven to have at least minimum performance requirements. The cost per kilowatt hour cost down curve is known, and several samples have been made for target customers. The process to make the battery still needs adjustment, but the majority of process steps have been proven as viable. First small orders may or may not have been received. The company needs to buy low volume, more automated manufacturing equipment. This in turn causes cash burn to be ramping up, and quite often new investment is required to maintain the business. Critically, new customers may ask the battery startup to prove manufacturing capability prior to placing an order. Where the process is precise or complex, and where low volume tooling may not be conclusive, a higher volume line may be procured earlier than would initially be ideal. Manufacturing focus now shifts to producing low volumes of product in a consistent manner. While OEE may be lower than target, improving quality levels and access capability and process capability become a focus. Test instruments need to fully test battery functionality and assembly integrity. And key gaps at this phase are engineering and project management bandwidth and the unknown nature of how long it will take to stabilize the assembly process. At this phase, your automation partner works with you to define and deliver appropriate test and assembly equipment. Planning for future scale is initiated, and ATS can lead these discussions. Line data management software such as ATS Illuminate become key to understanding process capability throughout the journey. We now shift to, we've got the low volume manufacturing line in place, and we now shift to the growth phase. This phase is about confidence. Confidence that the product design works, the manufacturing process is mostly understood, market demand is there, and that investor capital to fund the expansion is available. The focus of any new high volume automation needs to be driving cost per unit down, maximizing OEE, and managing the inevitable battery design changes. Company needs to procure the first high volume line, which will set the stage for Gigafactory production. In the effort to get the first high volume line production in place, several issues need to be addressed. Is the assembly process stable enough to justify an expensive assembly line? What is the right line output target considering market demand variability? What labor content provides the right mix of cost control and flexibility? What's the impact of current concept on scale plans? And are there facilities and site location challenges? Is the battery company organization structured to properly support large scale equipment procurement? And how do the growth plans for cell, module, and pack intertwine with what is needed immediately? At this phase, we need automation equipment configured to address product design maturity, process control for quality, and automation versus labor trade-offs. Using digital tools like simulation, digital twin, and line data management to optimize line solutions, and a focus on turnkey solutions of assembly, test, and process tools in one complete line. And we need to provide product management and operational processes to deliver equipment to aggressive schedules. So at the end of the growth phase, we now go through a stage which we term scaling. At the scaling stage, the true Gigafactory has arrived. The product and customer markets are established, financing is secured, and the focus now shifts to meeting high volume customer commitments. The approaches to scaling can take several forms, which we loosely categorize as replicating smaller increments of capacity. It could be from the first line that was procured in the growth phase, or we configure the Gigafactory scale equipment as a single very high volume line with optimized station counts at each process step with extensive material handling infrastructure. Every customer condition is unique and must be evaluated by engineers. As before, battery design changes may still be a concern, while the company is fully focused on high efficiency production. Material flow and zone interfaces become a major focus involving buffers, AGV integration, and end-of-line packout. The delivery of a turnkey automation concept, considering all aspects of overall system performance, is critical, and the digital landscape is optimized with the digital twin forming the backbone of further line enhancements, while line data management systems are used to understand and optimize production. And timing of financing often plays a role in which the deployment option or the deployment is proceeded with. In most scenarios, there's usually a phased approach which is used in order to properly manage capital while we scale to Gigafactory. In all aspects that are discussed above, ATS has experience and makes what we believe to be an ideal partner to have those discussions and supporting as we go to scale manufacturing and the Gigafactory. So once we evolve through the scaling stage, we now end up in maturity. At maturity, production is in full swing. challenges are now consistent with many other billion-dollar production businesses. OEE becomes a key operational driver, while battery designs may still change regularly. ATS is an ideal partner to help the battery company in this environment. We have experience establishing an environment of managing this change while still allowing production to continue in line with customer needs. Software tools provide data visibility, such as the ATS Illuminate software. Line technology upgrades can be managed by our team working collaborative with you, and a full suite of global services offerings, including training, spares, line upgrades, reliability, engineering, and on-site staffing support and provide holistic OEE coverage and improvement over time. So we've gone through the maturity phase, and essentially the battery manufacturer has now achieved Gigafactory capacity and capability, and the business has reached its ultimate objective. So as we go back to understand where we came from in the journey, we started off with the maturity curve, talking about ideation, through proof of concept, sample production, low volume manufacturing, growth, scaling, and finally maturity. It's an incredibly exciting journey. It's fascinating, it's stressful, and it's rewarding. The BESS space is very dynamic, very motivating for, I think, all of us, and it's a great path to be on. ATS can support your company in many different ways, and the dialogue is needed to figure out where exactly we can take that interaction. So we now get to the second poll question, and I'll pass it back to Andy to manage us through this poll question.
Yep, thank you very much, Robert. Yeah, I totally agree. It's a really exciting space. I'm not working in the battery energy storage space as such, I guess. I'm in publishing, but yeah, it's a really exciting one to be writing about, certainly, and learning about. So, folks, which stage do you see your company at? So you've got 7 options here that have come up in the pop-up, both on your screen and also on the right-hand side tab as well. So are you at the very earliest ideation stage, option number 1, or have you moved already to proof of concept, option number 2? Have you perhaps already begun sample production, number 3? Or number 4, are you already at low volume manufacturing? Or perhaps you are a little bit further along than that, and you're at the growth stage, which would be number 5. Have you already surpassed that growth stage and gone into scaling, option number 6? And finally, number 7, are you already at maturity at a stage of mass production of your devices? So yeah, please vote, and we'll revisit those, the poll results briefly, just as we start the Q&A, and then we'll also have another look as we conclude the session today.
So while we're all going through that, remarks wouldn't be remiss without thinking about what makes a good automation or technology partner, and what sorts of questions can we be asking in order to discriminate and to figure out what the right fit would be. A couple of questions. Does the partner understand the core technologies involved in battery manufacturing? What are the internal organizational gaps that the partner will be asked to fill? Is the partner accustomed to delivering automation on a turnkey basis? And does the partner have line integration and controls integration capability? Every piece of manufacturing automation has a mechanical component, it has a process component, and it has a significant controls component. And all of those need to be considered. Does the partner have sufficient scale for Gigafactory equipment requirements? And ultimately, another question is, are there services which the partner can provide which might defer investment in acquiring those capabilities internally? So significantly complex decision or discussion to be had with partners to understand your journey. And with that, we'll be going into Q&A in a second, but thank you very much for listening as we go through the 7-step journey and some of the factors which need to be considered there. We look forward to further dialogue with you as you continue down that battery manufacturing journey. I will make a note that I discussed a number of key terms which may or may not be clear in terms of their meeting, but feel free to reach out, and we'd be happy to have further dialogue around any of those issues. So I'll pass it back to Andy, and we'd be happy then to see how the poll results turned out and to engage in an interactive question and answer session.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Robert. So yes, indeed. So once again, a majority of the audience were good enough to respond into the poll. So what stage do you see your company at? So the biggest wedge of responses was in fact the earliest stage, number one, ideation. So 41% of respondents were ideation. In not such a close second, we have respondents, 15% of them to be precise, at the growth stage. Following on from that, proof of concept and sample production are pretty close together. In fact, low volume manufacturing is pretty close together. So response number two, proof of concept, 12%. Sample production, 11% of the audience that responded. And low volume manufacturing, 10%. And then slightly smaller shares of the audience are a bit further along in that journey. So 70% of respondents to the poll are at the stage of scaling their company. And 5% have already reached maturity in their production. So yeah, again, Robert, kind of what you might have expected.
Very good mix across the journey, and it echoes, I think, the level of excitement and the financing, the political winds which are behind the journey, and it echoes that a lot of people have an interest in the space, a lot of ideas of how to proceed, and also that if we think about the journey and the 7-stage journey takes multiple years, then it would be indicative that we have a pretty good spread across the people in the stage where they perceive their company to be at. So it's a very interesting poll result, and thank you for everybody to responding to the poll.
Awesome. And yeah, furthering the audience interaction piece, we had a lot of great questions from the audience, actually, Robert. I don't know if you've seen them coming in the questions tab, but there's still some coming in. So I think, as we said, we are not going to have time to deal with, well, even really a fairly small percentage of these today within this session. But ATS Automation, I'm sure, would be more than happy to help with a lot of these. But let's try and tackle some anyway, shall we?
Sure.
So Thomas asks, is there any way to decrease the time involved to complete the scaling and maturity phases? So Thomas notes that 7 to 10 years from inception creates challenges for investors in reaching an acceptable IRR. So Robert, in your opinion, is there any way to decrease that time involved?
That's a great question. And if we look at overall time frame of building and procuring the automation, that in a typical assembly line in the earlier phase, deliveries are faster. Once you get into scale lines, then you have to be calculating with a year of lead time. And so if we look at the number of iterative steps at a year of lead time in each of them, then you're adding up the stages to be a several-year journey. In addition, in our experience, that the stage that you don't want to skip is getting a battery product and a manufacturable product design, and making sure that the process involved to make that battery is firm and stable. To scale a process which is not reliable just creates more problems and more bottlenecks. And so that becomes a challenge. Having said that an overall approach to deliver on the Gigafactory scale more quickly, there have been a number of approaches which ATS has used over time. As we figure out the project plan, we take large systems, we divide them into risk and non-risk components. And based upon those risky components, then invoke different methodologies in order to take those off of the critical path. And so by doing so, then we feel that we can combine some of the steps. And by combining some of the steps and with an accurate understanding of the risk behind the program, then we can come to an agreement with the customer on what the right approach is and how we go from that. But definitely time is always a critical factor, and everybody would like to deliver faster. We will definitely be happy to work with you to understand those time constraints and how we can shorten that as much as possible.
Fantastic. And Noel asks, or rather Noel begins their question by saying that the life cycle stages that you ran through, Robert, they're very informative. But how does the manufacturer know when they're at a transition from one evolution stage to another? They do not seem readily visible. So what triggers should be set to recognize the progression through those different stages, perhaps?
Yeah, great question. And importantly, the 7 stages were set up to understand certain attributes and characteristics of where in a journey a customer is. It's a combination of battery design maturity, of investor appetite and how much capital has been provided. It's a matter of, is there a customer base for the product already established? And so if you combine the 3 factors of technology, so battery design, of process technology, of financing and market, if you put those 4 factors actually together, then you can see a progression going from ideation up through to scale. So I like the question. It's not black and white, and it's a matter of where you feel you are on that journey. And throughout some of the dialogue, then there also were factors that were overlapping. For example, some batteries may essentially end up going from low volume production straight up to scale, just based on the battery product and whether it makes sense. So I think that which stage you're at is important to define, but not as important as looking at the 4 factors that go into how we assess what stage you're at and addressing each of those 4 factors for any issues that you may need to solve.
Okay, terrific. So let's see if we can get a couple more of these done if you've still got time there, Robert. So Janani was asking what the considerations are in determining a location for the facility. They went on to ask, are there specific parts of the world that are better for battery manufacturing? And yeah, I don't know if we want to necessarily get into the geographical kind of detail of that, but perhaps in general terms, or well, I don't know, Robert, you know, whatever level of detail you'd like to kind of tackle the question, I guess. But yeah, basically, what are the considerations for determining a location for the facilities?
So I can answer the question based upon our experience, our dialogue with customers, as well as our own personal experiences around what it takes to properly maintain automation, which is put in place. And so critical factors there become obviously political and incentives. Critical factors become the end use market. And also, most critically, that once you go to Gigafactory scale, you're looking at a whole volume of very sophisticated equipment. It has issues and needs in terms of mechanical, in terms of controls, in terms of process technology that need to be supported on a regular basis. And therefore, the location of the Gigafactory also needs to consider where you have ready access to those highly skilled people that are going to run the equipment. Additionally, then you have access to labor to actually run the equipment, which is important as well. And all of these put together on a matrix then would help to justify which location gets preference. I don't think there's any one location around the world that makes more sense than another. And it's really a balance of factors across all of those inputs that would determine where your best bet is to put that Gigafactory.
Okay, terrific. And Info asks, what's the cost of consulting with ATS in taking production from ideation to the small scale prototype phase? Now, I understand that perhaps you might not want to talk specific numbers in a public forum such as this, Robert, but in terms of what it might cost in terms of the overall capex, I guess, or again, however you want to approach this question, but I think it might be interesting, particularly for Info and others that are looking at kind of going from ideation to that kind of the early stage prototype phase.
Yeah, and so thank you for the question. I guess I would answer that as it depends. And the discussions that we have with customers are, there's no particular script, there's no particular shopping cart where you pick option A, B, and C, and that's how we propose initial engagement. The range of engagement goes all the way from let's have an initial dialogue and let's understand where you are in the journey, and we together might decide that it's too early yet. We might provide some simple advice, and then as you go further along in your journey, then we quote studies either on a firm price basis, or we can quote those engagements on a time and material basis. And so it really depends on the nature of what you're looking for. Critically is that we're supporting the journey to get you to being a Gigafactory, and that as we start to establish partnership with you, that partnership sentiment is a part of how we're interacting and how we move forward together.
Terrific. Okay, thanks. And I think the last question for today, because unfortunately, we have kind of run out of time, much as I would absolutely love to keep going through these, and I imagine maybe you might as well. But Adam asks, and I think it's a real question that I think more than one audience member has actually asked about safety and the safety aspect of batteries. So Adam asked what the role is that ATS could play in improving the safety of both factories and the finished batteries themselves, and if you've got any sort of general commentary, I guess, in terms of making batteries safely at mass scale, that would be a great note to perhaps finish on.
Yeah, and great question. And safety in the battery space actually is multifaceted. It's everything from how do you make the batteries safely in the battery factory, all the way through to how do you then have a product design which is in the field, which is safe. And so throughout those journeys, ATS has experience with many different lithium-ion battery projects, and we have experience with battery programs with different chemistries. And so as we go through that journey, we are working with you and your team to understand the manufacturing footprint and the manufacturing equipment to make sure that battery safety in the manufacturing operation is considered. We will work with you on risk analysis to understand what that means in the battery facility, and so that we come up with a solution which is safe to manufacture, and that we're mitigating any of those potential risks due to the inherent battery chemistry. The other piece of safety becomes occupational safety and designing and building pieces of equipment which are safe to operate, and where the equipment itself, if it's not designed and built in a safe manner, is inherently a risk to the people working the line. ATS designs and builds equipment to global safety standards. We deliver equipment to North America, to Europe, as well as to Asia, and we are compliant or exceed the local occupational safety regulations and rules, and make sure that using risk assessments and other tools that any sort of injury and damage to employees is absolutely mitigated. It's the most important thing that we do every day. In terms of ensuring that the safety of the end battery is guaranteed, we can provide input based upon what we've seen in the past, but ultimately the individual company needs to understand their own chemistry and their own product attributes to make sure that the design is safe. We can consult where we can and can provide that input where we can, but we typically will then advise if there's a separate issue that a different entity would be involved in to consult on. If we have access to companies that could consult in a given technology, we will. But essentially, we need to stay in our own swim lanes and make sure that that we're not representing a capability which is better fitted to somebody else.
Excellent. Okay. Well, yeah, with that, unfortunately, as I say, we've run out of time, but it's been a really informative session and been brilliant seeing the questions coming in from the audience. And as I say, with seeing the polls as well and hearing what people's priorities are, the stages that are at. So, yeah, I mean, I wish all of you all the best in your Gigafactory journeys. I hope they go amazingly well. And yeah, all that remains really is for me to once again thank the audience most of all for joining, but also to thank you, Robert, and ATS Automation for bringing this topic to us today and presenting your expertise on it.
Great. Yeah, and I'd as well like to thank all in the audience who took time out of their day to attend. Great having this chat with you. And Andy, thanks very much to you for organizing the session, and I felt like it was great, and thank you to all.
That's fantastic. You're very welcome, Robert. Okay, everybody, we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.